My name is Jamie Wood-Riley. I use she, they pronouns, and I am a program officer at VentureWell on the Higher Education Catalyst team. I'm excited to be here today to learn with and from these folks here on this panel. This is creating inclusive and interdisciplinary design competitions. And I'm going to say just a few words to get us started. Design competitions and challenges have long been a way to catalyze student engagement in innovation and entrepreneurship. During this foundation session, you will hear how two different institutions have successfully designed and run their own design challenges. So I'm going to pass the mic, or turn mine off, and welcome Wichita State University.
Well, hi, I'm Maggie Schoonover. I'm an assistant educator and director for sustainable innovation at Wichita State University. I'm going to be talking about Cosmoshocks, which is our student research experience. So a little bit of background on this. It's not a design challenge that we created. We actually are participating in the NASA Suits Design Challenge. So that's put on by NASA Microgravity University. And Suits stands for Student User Interface Technology for Students. And so it basically, our goal is to create a research experience that is kind of created around the Suits Design Challenge, but because it was more of a competition, so there's dozens of schools that apply, but only, at least last year, they selected 10. And so we've been participating since 2020, and our the 2021 team from Wichita State and the 2022 team from Wichita State were selected for participation. Our 2023 team was not, but all those students still wanted to do the work. And so we ended up creating this research experience to allow them to just continue and do it anyway. And their goal is to obviously get better so that they do get selected next year. But basically, our purpose is to provide a hands-on, real-time opportunity for students to work on what we're calling interdisciplinary teams to research and develop extended reality technology for extraplanetary research. So kind of making it as broad as possible, but really our focus is on XR, so that includes things like augmented reality and virtual reality. Students get to design, develop, and test what they create. And for example, this was the design from the 2022 Suits team that was accepted. Not only were they accepted, but they actually got to go to Johnson Space Center and test what they built at the Rock Yard, which was really, really awesome. That's what they designed and proposed. Obviously, that's not what they actually did. That's part of the experience. But this is them down at Johnson Space Center last May. So Kristen Smith is my counterpart, and she was not able to come to this, but she's the other faculty advisor for this group. She did an excellent. Her expertise is like outreach, so she did an excellent job with all these pictures. But they're having fun in Galveston. They're in front of the space shuttle. They're collaborating up in the top. I think that one was staged. I think they were a little bit more interested in the other activities. But they did a poster presentation at the museum at Johnson Space Center, like all the teams did. And then so this image in the top right is them actually at the Rock Yard. So that's where NASA actually tests their stuff, like for Artemis missions. So they have a moon yard and a Mars yard. And so they got to go out at night with their HoloLens, and were there with their NASA mentors and with the Suits mentors, and actually got to go through challenges. The saddest part of all this is actually I didn't get to go. So I was 9 months pregnant and gave birth the week before. So I did all the hard work as faculty advisor, and of course I didn't get to go, but I did get to watch their exit pitch. So that was not televised. That was on YouTube, so I got to join the live stream and got to hear all the stories. So that's kind of what we're doing with the Cosmoshocks experience. Okay, so I'm going to hand it over to you guys.
Thanks. Well, hey everyone, my name is Robert Falconer, and I'm here with Amanda LeMatty, and we're on the student leadership team for the Bench to Bedside competition. So the Bench to Bedside competition is a medical innovation competition for students, run by students as well, and that's a really important part of our mission. Basically what we're trying to do is have students who have ideas about how they want to improve healthcare, or maybe students who don't have any ideas but just want to get involved in improving healthcare, and kind of remove those barriers or perceived barriers to getting involved in the industry which can seem complex with a lot of regulatory hurdles and intellectual property challenges, and basically scaffold the process along the way for them of how to take a device that's just an idea and actually turn it into a commercial project. So we have an ecosystem that we'll talk about in a little bit of how we actually do that, but our primary goal is kind of giving students that opportunity. And then as a secondary goal, we also don't want to stop just at the competition. We want to support these students for success in entrepreneurship and running a business. So we actually have award funding for these students for the most successful teams at the competition so they can launch their own companies and actually take their products to market after the competition. And then kind of a main high-level goal for us is just helping students develop that entrepreneurial mindset. Even though we are a healthcare competition, we have students across all ranges of the university. We're very interdisciplinary, and actually our most successful teams often have members from various aspects of the university. So we really want to cater to everyone and develop that mindset, because we realize people might not be working in healthcare, but we think that entrepreneurial mindset can be valuable no matter where they choose to take their talents. So I'll let Amanda talk a little more about the scope.
Yeah, so Robert kind of gave like a broad overview of what Bench to Bedside is. And so this slide we kind of wanted to keep up just so you can kind of have an idea of how the teams actually move forward in this process. But as for the scope, kind of on our end, what we're really focusing on is trying to leverage all of the resources that our university has. So as Robert says, like the most successful teams are the ones that are interdisciplinary, and the same kind of goes for running the competition. Like it's not just something run by us. We need to work with the business school. We need to work with the medical school, the engineering school. We have different people that are involved in our we have different people involved at the law school that help students go and file for their first provisional patent. And that's really kind of like where the success is in that, and that we are trying to make sure that we're able to leverage the resources we already have. So we're not building something from the ground up. We're just trying to actually use what we have so we know that we'll be successful. And this is just kind of to give you guys a feel for what we're doing. Everything ends in this competition night that Robert already mentioned, and these are some of the projects that have come out of that.
If you could pass the mic back to Maggie. So, Maggie, Wichita State's design competition included students from 4 colleges and 10 departments. Can you talk about what practices you engaged in to ensure students felt a sense of belonging and to help them form successful and inclusive teams?
Sure. So as you guys mentioned, the most successful teams are very interdisciplinary. So for this particular design challenge, we had students from innovation design, we had engineering, human factor psychology was actually like a very core component of the success of this team, and then we have computer science. So there's a lot of software development in Unity, and then there's a lot of design aspects. We also had graphic design students, and they are all super excited because it's NASA, right? But they don't know how to talk to each other. And so we actually spend a lot of time on icebreakers. Like we kind of, it's almost like the faculty from my college are almost like more professional facilitators or like professional like therapists and counselors. And we just create those collisions. Like we want them to talk to each other. And so we tend to start the semester with a lot of icebreakers, just really silly, fun activities. Like we want them to just get to know each other. I should say too, like the team size is our biggest team was 14. Our average is about 8 students, and so that also helps us create those more meaningful conversations. And then we just kind of get into it. And so we want to kind of get the ball rolling as soon as possible. We start our designers like make a design, and then they have to do a design review. And so we use a lot of agile product management practices, a lot of design thinking practices. And we find that with just getting going and making sure that they understand that you're all here because we need to hear from all of you. And so like, for example, the 2022 team that got to go down there, we had we had a freshman in aerospace engineering all the way up to a PhD student in human factors. Actually, we had 2 PhD students. And so even though our freshman member was very self-conscious, he's like, I don't have anything to contribute here. I barely know how to code in Unity. I want to do that, but I don't know how to do that yet. Fortunately, we also had a lot of master students in innovation design who are kind of used to this mode of thinking, and so they were very, very encouraging. They're like, no, we need to hear from you, like if nothing more than just to say that sucks. can you fix that, please? That doesn't make sense to me. Like, that's really, really important, because you have, especially when you have graduate students, they're very myopic. They've been in this discipline for a long time. You need that outside perspective to kind of pull them out of it. And so just having those, what are very industry standard types of conversations where you're just kind of, not necessarily tearing down, but you're giving that feedback so that you can make it better. Like, that was good. And then honestly, just if anyone's been on like a project that is like past the due date and you don't have everything done yet and you just need to like grind it out, that kind of trauma bonding, that honestly they ended the experience being really, really close because they went through this really challenging experience together. And that was, and we consistently get the feedback that that's what they enjoyed the most. Like, they learn a lot. It's really good for their CVs, but they've made lifelong friends they feel that they can rely on.
I also hear that you had like team names and logos and T-shirts. That was probably a little bit helpful too.
Students like swag, so that was actually one of the first things we did was the logo. So they have to come up with a team name. They come up with a logo. And then we make sure they have their T-shirts. We had like buttons. We have Kristen actually made, I have it on my backpack, but like the like pull before flight kind of thing. Like, she had those like embroidered, and so we just made a whole thing of it. And then I heard, since I didn't get to attend, but our team, because they were already used to that kind of like engagement and just talking, like going out and having fun, like we made sure like, you guys need to like go just like get like lunch together or something. Like, don't like just be heads down work all the time. And we're really pushy with that stuff because we know that a lot of the creativity comes from those other interactions, not just the work. And so apparently the Wichita State team was the fun team when they were at Johnson. All the other schools were heads down. We're going to do this. Like, it's all about like the actual competition. And our team's like, no, we're going to go to Galveston. You guys want to come? Like, let's go get dinner. Like, let's hang out and have drinks. And it was funny because we know that, like, because we've been in industry and we know that the power of those kinds of approaches. But our students have a huge inferiority complex coming from a mid-tier school like Wichita State. I mean, most people don't know where Wichita's at. They think it's Wichita Falls, Texas. It's not. And, they were up against teams from Embry-Riddle, Stanford, MIT, like student groups that are used to being invited to these kinds of things. And for them to see that their power and just being like taking a break and like demonstrating that that's also time well spent, like that was very empowering for them. They came back like, yeah, we were the cool team, like we made friends and like nobody else wanted to talk to each other, but then we started talking and then everybody talked to each other. It was like way better. Like, yeah, that's right, like that's what we've been trying to say. So just stuff like that, like those of us that are in these innovation entrepreneurship spaces are really familiar with those kinds of techniques. We just brought that to a more STEM related area.
Thanks, Maggie. That's great. So if you could pass it down. So question for University of Utah. In the bench to bedside competition, student teams work with university physicians, engineering professionals, and business professionals to bring ideas from concept to creation, all while analyzing the patent landscape, determining a regulatory pathway, and developing a go-to-market strategy. Most design competitions end at the pitch, but you have all these structures in place to ensure that students can get to the point of commercialization. How do you scaffold this process? And what advice do you have for institutions that are looking to do something similar?
Yeah, so I can kind of answer the scaffold the process part of the question. So first of all, everything that has been said, that takes a really long time. So that being said, the Bench to Bedside program is about 8 months long. So we start at the beginning of the year, and this is run through the Center for Medical Innovation at the University of Utah. That's kind of how everything comes together. But the CMI goes and starts off the year for the section that's for identify your problem, and they bring all the students together for our first launch event. So really the purpose of this is to get students to meet each other, to try and develop a team early on, and really just try and bring in some of the clinicians, some of the faculty. Everyone's invited just to do that first primary networking event. And then following that, our next biggest event is Reverse Pitch. So here we actually invite clinicians from all over the state of Utah. They primarily are from University of Utah Health to come and kind of just give a pitch on something that they have happening in their everyday work environment that's a problem that they want students to work on. So this is kind of how we try and fill that gap for students who want to be involved, but they're not exactly sure where to start. We do try and give them a problem to start with as well. And so the next part of the bench to bedside process is demonstrate your solution. So we know that a lot of students may not have the engineering background to try and make a prototype from scratch. I mean, I'm an engineer, so this is the part that makes sense to me, but we have a lot of medical students or business students who want to be involved and don't really know where to start. So we actually provide a $500 prototyping fund to every student team that registers. And so the Center for Medical Innovation has a full prototyping lab and engineers that work there full time that students are able to meet with. We have office hours with the prototyping engineers, and this is kind of trying to bridge that gap for students. And then as students are developing their project, a lot of them still are looking for mentorship in industry or just from other engineers or research faculty at the university. So we also host a mentor mixer. And so this is for students to try and come and meet with industry professionals or clinicians or people who work in patent law, things like that, and just be able to kind of network with them, engage with them. And then finally, the final part of bench to bedside is the go-to-market strategy. So this is where we're really trying to get the business students involved because they're the ones who know the business stuff. That's where a lot of the engineering students and medical students are lacking. And so we host different workshops where we bring in successful entrepreneurs to explain kind of their pathway, what was successful for them, and to talk with students about this is kind of how you could bring your idea all the way up to the point of commercialization. And so all of that's kind of the chronological order of it. But throughout the year, we do also have our student leadership team there for the students. We host office hours every single week. Anyone can come in, bug us, ask us any question that's on their mind. And we're kind of there to help them throughout that process. And so I'll kind of leave it to you for the advice.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. And I think just touching on the advice, you have to remember if you're designing a student competition, the students are the most important part of the competition. They're the lifeblood. They're the ones putting in all the hours, working on the projects that eventually form the competition night. So really catering to the student as much as possible is essential to having a successful competition. And one way that we really do this that Amanda touched on was kind of our student leadership team. So I think the office hours are a great example that she touched on. Students are obviously more comfortable interfacing with other students than faculty who might seem intimidating. So on a weekly basis, we have students reaching out to us, asking questions, saying, hey, you have this in the competition. I'm not really sure what I should be doing. And we're happy that they feel comfortable coming to us because then we can keep them involved in the process and kind of guide them along the way and get them to competition night. And I think another important part of that is establishing trust with the students. Obviously, they're designing medical products. A lot of them are their own ideas, and they have a lot of passion and invested interest in them. So we want to make it very clear that we are not trying to take any of your IP. This is all yours. We don't expect any royalties or anything, even if you're awarded money. This is all for you, and we're just offering you the avenue to be successful and design your product. I guess a second piece of advice that Amanda touched on as well was really keep in mind the resources that are already there at the university. You don't have to do this all yourself. There's tons of people like you all who are willing to spend time helping students. We have the mentor night, that's all volunteer. We have plenty of clinicians that are willing to come in and pitch their ideas. And there are those people at your university. It may take some legwork to find them, but they do exist, and they're going to be extremely valuable when you're designing the competition. And I think just as a last piece of advice, especially in healthcare where there's a lot of perceived, at least, barriers to entry, just kind of a complicated process, make it as easy for students as possible. We get a lot of comments like, I don't know if I can participate, I don't know anything about healthcare. And with the prototyping fund and all the resources we bring in, we really hope to make it easy for any student, no matter their background, to compete and get involved.
Thank you so much. So, excuse me, this is going to be my last question. So just as a reminder, we're going to go to Slido next, and I'll put that slide back up so everybody has access in just a minute. But I would like for anybody or everybody on the panel to answer this one. What challenges did you and your students face in creating inclusive design competitions, and how did you overcome or work within those challenges?
So I guess something that we've noticed coming into Bench to Bedside just in the last 2 years is really the post-COVID engagement with students. It's been really difficult to get students to want to do things in person now. And even if there are some students in person, it's just the expectation of a hybrid option, things like that. We're trying to make it to where everyone is able to access the content, especially since our competition is for the state of Utah at this point. So with trying to get more students engaged in person, we found that really the best way to do this is something Robert has already mentioned, is really finding like faculty champions that are willing to explain your idea to their students. Because I mean, the students may read about an event or see it posted online, but that may be something that they're like, oh, I don't know if I want to go to it, or oh, I may have something better to do. But if someone that they know and know relatively well, like a professor, is like, hey, you should go to this awesome event, I think it would be really useful for you for this class, things like that, students are way more likely to come. And that's really kind of been what has helped us try and bring students more in person now.
Yeah, and just to add on a little bit, I keep harping on this idea of the student leadership team, but that's because I think it's really important. And not only having student leaders, but a diverse group of student leaders. So Amanda and I are both engineers, but on our leadership team, we also have someone in business, someone in medicine. And I think having that diverse group of people allows you to understand what resources there are in different colleges. For example, I'm very familiar how to interact with students in the College of Engineering, but in the College of Business, I don't really know that much. So it's nice to have a diverse group of people to really access all areas of the university.
I think our main two challenges have been time primarily. So the challenge is described as equivalent to a 3-credit-hour course. We don't have it as a course for the purposes of different students from different departments have different amounts of flexibility in what kind of courses they can take. And also, we didn't want you to have to pay to have the experience. So students sign up not listening and not realizing how much work it is, and then it runs into just barriers in their time between jobs and other classes. So you can be really passionate about it, but it really does take a lot of work. And then the other barrier, which still has a time component, is the onboarding of getting such a diverse group of students to figure out how to work together, how to communicate, and then how to iteratively get something done. It just takes a while. I mean, there's lots of research out there that says like your average new hire at a company takes, 3 years to be productive or to provide value. This competition is about an 8-month competition. So you submit your proposal in the end of October, selection is in December, and then you have spring semester until May to actually build what you suggested building. So if you think about what industry expects, I have 3 years to get this person to be productive, and then we have to have them productive in 8 months, and actually less than that. Again, it's a time constraint trying to get them onboarded quickly.
Okay, so I'm going to give everybody just another minute, and including myself, because I need to grab this Slido QR code. Sure.
What the challenges are?
Yeah, how are you defining inclusion and diversity specifically?
So for us, since it's a STEM competition, it's women and minorities. We want to see more of that on our student teams. We have a pretty diverse campus, so that's not been too much of a problem. Also, both faculty advisors are women, and that we've heard directly from students that helps them feel like they can come in. A lot of the other STEM-focused design challenges are headed by men, just because demographically statistically they're more likely to be in that position. Fortunately for us, we already kind of have that, people want to see themselves represented, and so that's helped us with that onboarding. And it's a smaller team too, so we don't have to be we haven't had to be intentional with our selection process yet. We could see that changing because obviously it's gotten very popular across campus, and so we want to keep the team small and manageable. So we haven't run into that part yet, but that's something that we have in the back of our heads.
Yeah, and I guess for us, when we're talking about interdisciplinary, typically most of the challenges we face have been in recruiting students from different colleges. So that's kind of the main area that we see trouble. But obviously, we are looking to cater to all demographic groups as well. And I think the way that we do that is really by trying to make it as inclusive as possible, in the sense of we provide resources for every student, no matter their background. We almost expect that most people have no background in healthcare or any sort of innovation. And by providing all those resources, we hope that it would be available to everyone.
That's great. Thanks for that question, Susan. So I'm going to go ahead and reference questions that are on Slido, and you can continue to submit. We do have about just a little over 30 minutes, so we should have time for quite a few. So the first question is, how do you recruit from so many programs? You maybe started to touch on that, Robert. Do you want to talk about that a little bit more? How do you recruit?
Yeah, so I think some of the main facets of our recruiting are these kind of outreach events. So being driven by students, like I was kind of mentioning earlier, we have different avenues at the university to know where students who would want to get involved are. And I guess just reaching out through those avenues as students. I guess it's easy to talk about it from the perspective of a student, and it may be harder if you're a faculty member to understand what those kind of avenues are. But I think that is the tremendous benefit of having students involved, because we are the ones that know other students, know who wants to get involved, and know where to reach out to them.
Yeah, and I mean, I obviously agree with everything that Robert has said, but I think that one of the other ways we've been able to really recruit is with direct class pitches. That's kind of something that we start at the beginning of the year, right once people are coming in. They're excited to start in the semester, things like that. Our student leadership team will go and reach out to individual classes that are focused on entrepreneurship or innovation, or their senior design capstone programs, and we'll ask, can we just come and give a 5-minute pitch to you? And so we'll go to different schools, we'll go to different engineering classes, we'll go to different business and entrepreneurship courses. And we also have pitches in the medical school as well for students who are in their first or second year that would be able to dedicate the time to it. And I think that that's been the most successful for us.
Thank you. Maggie, do you want to address this question?
Yeah, so we did, this is our third year. So the first 2 years we did more of an invitation only approach. So we would just email faculty in other departments, departments from which we knew we wanted students with that skill set, and just said, hey, do you have anyone that you would recommend for this? And since we're the interdisciplinary department, we, I think, have a better grasp of how interdisciplinary we want it to be. And we know that we need people from all these different disciplines to be successful. And then this last year, we tried a different approach, and we actually just did an open call. So we kind of combined the announcement for the Suits Challenge with another announcement related to kind of some NASA research. And we just said, for students interested in participating, we have an information session at this date and time. And we had 30 students show up to that information session. And we said, if this is what it is, these are the expectations. And we actually listed out, these are the skills that we're looking for. And so we would say things like design, and not just by design, we mean graphic design, human factors design, UI, UX design. We need specifically Unity software development for AR, VR. We need marketing and outreach. We need, aerospace and mechanical engineering. We need geology, because everything on the moon is geology, which is oddly the hardest one. We've yet to recruit a geology student, which I don't understand. And then our students hear about it all the time, so we don't usually have any trouble recruiting innovation design students. And that was just as successful. So the open call, I think it was how we communicated it, because students don't necessarily know what interdisciplinary means, or they hear, NASA spacesuits, and they're like, well, I'm in graphic design, that doesn't apply to me. And so we've tried to be very explicit about how it does.
That's great. Thank you. So I have a kind of a two-part question, and I think the first part is probably going to be maybe a head nod. So these are all extracurricular activities, is that correct? Or are they credit-bearing course-related activities?
So for ours, it can be whatever you want. So we have students that, so our college has a few avenues to get some project credit hours. So we have a graduate level and an undergraduate level, innovation and practice hours or project credit hours, depending on what what school or college you're in, they can use that as elective hours, or they need to have research credit. Our engineering students have to get what they call engineering plus credit, which is they have to prove that they've done a research experience. Our graphic design students have to do internship, so they can get internship credits for participation in this. Our honors students have to also have research experience. So we've left it open so that the students can apply it to their degree however they want. Or they could just do it for fun. We have students that do that too.
Very cool. So for University of Utah, it's extracurricular and it's not credit bearing or, okay, fantastic. So the second part of this question is, how are these challenges funded at your university?
So the entire bench to bedside competition is entirely philanthropically funded. So we have donors that will donate money to the Center for Medical Innovation specifically for bench to bedside. So this prototyping fund that goes to all students, that is purely from donations, and the milestone funding that's awarded at competition night is funded through the same mechanism.
So we were told or advised during the kind of announcement for the students competition that every state has a space grant associated with it, and that you should contact your space grant agency and ask for money. So I did that, and I just emailed Scott, who is our director for that, and I said, I was told by NASA to ask you for money for this. And he's like, yeah, they do that. That doesn't mean we have it. I was like, okay, but like how... help me out here. Like I'm new to this. Like, what should I do? He's like, well, what are you doing? And so we had, I gave the pitch. He's like, I squirrel away money for stuff like this because it always comes up. So I have a little bit that I can give you. And so they were actually, it's not a lot, right? It wasn't even enough to buy a HoloLens, but it was enough to buy most of a HoloLens. And so that's what we need to get started. And so now I have a good working relationship with them. And I actually was just last week submitted an EPSCoR PDG grant through the NASA Kansas Space Grant Consortium, which is under that as well. So, sometimes it's just starting really, really small. Fortunately, our college is used to not finding funding for a lot of these extracurricular research experience type things, and so my dean was very supportive. Like he felt that there was value in kind of getting it started. He also squirrels away money for this kind of stuff to give us faculty kind of that springboard to get to the point where we can find the appropriate grants and work from there.
So we have a related question for the Bench to Bedside program. So Robert and Amanda, how do you get funds for the awards? Is that also through donation? Okay. And do you look for sponsors?
Yes, but that is something that the student leadership team is not necessarily involved with. Justin Brunson is actually here. He's the associate director for the Center for Medical Innovation. So if anyone has questions about that, I cannot answer that, but I'm sure that Justin would be happy to talk with you.
Raise your
after
hand,
this.
Justin. Thank you. That's great. Okay, so curious about measuring success. Like, how do you define success? How do you evaluate whether you're being successful? Those kinds of questions.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. For us, I think it's really about the experience of developing that entrepreneurial mindset and understanding what it takes to be successful in healthcare, which obviously saying that does sound a little bit intangible. But I think when you can take a student who comes to you at the beginning and says, hey, I don't know anything about healthcare. I don't even have an idea of what I could possibly do to be in this competition. Like, where do I even start? And then you can kind of scaffold the process along the way and watch them come April compete and have a successful product that's honestly relatively fleshed out, maybe even win money and start a company after that. To me, that's a measurable form of success. And there's plenty of stories and dozens and over 100 teams where we've seen that happen. So I think to us, competition night is certainly the culmination of all the work we do and a great measure of success for the program.
That's great. Thanks, Robert.
So since this is kind of a new program for us, we're still learning what success means. So obviously for the faculty, we're like, well, the students had a great time. And we know that their CV is improved by this, and they said it was awesome, so that's successful, right? But that's not what the university, they say they care about that, but they also have to have metrics to back that up. So we have started tracking metrics like like the number of students involved, like what is our representation among women and minority. We've maintained an average of 50% women on the team, and I intend to keep it that way. We also, because we're the interdisciplinary college on campus, we also want to show that we're being successful in that and getting students from other colleges to collaborate together. So we keep track of how many colleges have been on the team. We're trying to, our goal is to have every college on campus represented at one point. So we're working on that. And then we also track, or at least we're trying to create a kind of process for tracking outcomes for the students. So how many NASA, and some of these are actually inherited from what NASA actually tracks. So they want to know when you do a STEM outreach event, how many people came, how many of them were from underrepresented groups, how many of them were women, how many were teachers, like K through 12, all that stuff. So we've tried to just kind of adopt some of those measures as well. We did have a student get a NASA internship, and so he was down at Johnson Space Center over the fall. So that's a success for us. If we can say, like, by rights of participating in this, we had this many students get internships or this many students get hired by that agency, that's success. And then now we're kind of trying to just grow the research experience and actually do some research with it. So if we can get some grant funding and research proposal or research money in, and then maybe be able to support more students in field trips and stuff like that, that's a success metric too that the university recognizes.
Yeah, that's great. There are lots of ways to measure success, aren't there? So we have a question about student engagement, and how do you promote student engagement, or do you see student attrition, and how do you address that? So student engagement and student attrition, how do you keep students engaged?
So when you say student engagement, you mean specifically with the design challenge?
That's a good question. This isn't mine. Whoever posed this question could clarify if you'd like. Okay, great.
So I feel like that's this. I'll talk about like what we did this year. So once they get invited to go, like actually test their stuff with NASA, that's not a problem. They're very well motivated. This year, though, the 2023 team was not accepted, and so we did lose about half of the original students that were interested. But the students that were remaining were actually the students that were doing the work anyway. I think because we ran a bit of an experiment this year because the students weren't directly recommended by other faculty. They hadn't necessarily demonstrated to somebody else that they were able to manage the extra work. So those that are there really want to be there. So that's not been as much of an issue for us, just because the carrot on the stick is such a big carrot that they're very, very invested.
And yeah, it is pretty difficult, especially whenever like the competitions we're talking about or the programs last months, and so students have to kind of go semester to semester trying to remain involved. I think kind of the best way that we've been able to keep students engaged is trying to repeatedly talk to them throughout the semester. So our student leadership team, we reach out to the individual teams. They have to register through us to get their prototype funding. So we know who actively is kind of working on the projects, and we'll reach out to them and just kind of ask, like, do you need any help? Like, is there any confusion you have? And since the process is so long as well, students are always doing something, like whether or not it's they're trying to meet with some of the regulatory staff at the CMI to file their provisional, or they need to come in for prototyping services at the Center for Medical Innovation. They kind of have a lot of things to do throughout the year, so they never run out of things, which kind of makes it easier to keep them engaged. But it is a lot of that kind of personal interaction too that I think has been pretty successful for us.
Yeah, and I'll just add on, it's definitely no easy task. I mean, especially in a competition that's purely extracurricular, and I won't sugarcoat it, like, it's a lot of work. Amanda and I have both competed. It's a lot of work to take an idea to a product that you can compete with. But I do think a lot of the reason that we lose teams is because they feel they're unsupported. So by offering them a lot of resources, we're able to keep them close. Because these are students, I mean, we have anywhere from 30 to 50 teams competing each year. So there's certainly a large resource of students who are really motivated and want to get involved. And I think the ones that in the past have fallen off just haven't felt like they had the support or know what to do. So like Amanda mentioned some of the resources already, but that's really what we've been trying to do to keep those teams.
Yeah. So just to make sure that the camera hears that, how much is the award?
Yeah, so we have a couple of different award categories. The grand prize is $20,000, and then there's individual award categories for like best in medicine, engineering that are more in the $5,000 range. I mean, I can speak as a competitor. I'm not going to say the amount of work isn't justified by the award, but I don't think that's like the primary reason people do it. It's certainly a great incentive to kind of, like reap the fruits of your labor at the end. It's like, oh, I can have this award, but at least in my view, that's not the primary reason people compete.
Okay, so the question is whether teams work with community members or customers or stakeholders in their problem discovery process.
So yes, students work with, whenever they're going through the needs finding process, we actually have our launch event for student teams to meet. And then the first workshop that we have immediately following that is all about needs finding and customer discovery. So we're really trying to teach these students, if you are trying to find the problem yourself, like not necessarily just using one from reverse pitch or something like that, this is the correct way to do so. So this is how you conduct observations without having some kind of bias in what you're looking at. And that's kind of the way that we structure it so students can go and actually do this needs finding on their own.
Thank you. Maggie, did you have?
So in our case, NASA Suits provides a mission description, so they're already telling you what they want, what the problem is for them. But then we have an innovator in residence with our college who is a current NASA scientist at Johnson, and so he acts as a mentor for our group. And then for those groups that are accepted into the challenge, you also get assigned a mentor, so they get to work with people who are actually on Artemis mission components. And then you can bring in as many kind of industry mentors as you want. And we've tried to do that over the last few years, but our students are honestly very bad at asking for advice. And the mentors aren't sure what the students want. So we've had a little bit of kind of a mismatch in communication there. But we have been consistently asked for kind of workshops from the students. So for those, we'll always have multiple students that want to learn Unity, for example, or multiple students that want to learn UX UI design. And then none of them know Agile product management, and they want to learn that. And so we're kind of thinking about, and rather than just saying, this is a mentor, you can ask them anything, having them come in and maybe do those workshops.
Great, thank you. So one question is, are there principles such as do no harm discussed as part of the development process?
No, I mean, again, ours is more like if the suit rips, they die, or like if they fall down, they'll die. So it's more of like kind of hazard
there
avoidance.
There are consequences.
Yeah.
In healthcare, how is that discussed?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm not sure it's something we explicitly discuss, but kind of in healthcare, it's one of the principles, and most of the motivation of people competing is they want to do good and help people in healthcare. So it's almost kind of intrinsically built into the competition.
And Robert, earlier you mentioned IP. Do students own the IP that's based on an idea offered by doctors?
So we intentionally try and kind of stay out of the discussions of how the IP is split. Students do file a provisional patent if they would like to, and we fund the patent. But whenever it comes down to how are you going to break this down, if they're working with a clinician and the clinician gave them the idea, then it needs to be a discussion between them, is kind of to figure out, okay, even if the clinician gave the problem, were they a part of developing the solution? Because that's really where the IP is going to come from. But that is a very touchy subject and definitely varies situation to situation. So that's kind of something we leave up to the students. And then whenever they're filing for their provisional patent, we will give advice to, but we can't assign values or anything like that to them.
Great. And Maggie, what about for the NASA group? How does IP work for them?
You have to sign a document when you submit a proposal that says NASA owns everything.
So you're serving NASA. Cool. Okay. But you get to hang out with the spaceships, so that's kind of cool. Okay, so folks are asking for you to share some success stories of teams who've excelled in competitions. And what happens to them? Do they get referred to an accelerator? What are the next steps to promising teams?
So why they think about it. So in our case, if you're a successful team, you get to go down and actually test your stuff. The students afterwards, typically, so far we have not had a student repeat the process. There's nothing keeping them from rejoining, but it is so much work. I think that by the time they're done with it, they've gotten the value out of it, and they kind of see no need to do it again. But in terms of like long-term success, they've all gone on to have either internships with NASA. We had another PhD student get an internship with like Meta, I think. Our graphic design students have actually gone into kind of UI UX design in research and product development, which they didn't realize that they could do. We have another master's student that's actually working on, like, for his final project on a VR based startup. And so it's kind of the introduction to the technology and skills that they end up going in career directions that they didn't realize were open to them, which is ultimately what we think is a successful and valuable use of their time.
So it's not always starting their own business. Sometimes it's going into corporations already in existence and being innovative in those spaces. Great. Yeah, go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, and I can offer a specific example, and then maybe Amanda will speak more generally. But my team actually competed in Bench to Bedside last year, and we won the grand prize. So thank you. So we were able to form an LLC around our idea, and now we have a company, and we have $20,000 in assets. And the one thing about healthcare is that if anyone is involved, you know it is very slow. It is a decade-plus long process. But I can say, at least for our team, only a year out, now that we've had the resources, I've met with regulatory consultants about the future of our product. We're looking into contract manufacturing to develop our prototype, because on competition night, we had a conceptual prototype, which basically means we had a tube that didn't work. So now it's been a great opportunity to actually meet with engineers and manufacturers who are working to make a more professional, commercial version of our device. And that experience has been fantastic for me as a student who eventually is interested in going into medical device commercialization. And it certainly would not have been possible without the resources that we won from the competition.
Yeah, so Robert probably had the best example since it's going to be a personal experience. I know off the top of my head that we do have another group called Lightline Medical that they were in Bench to Bedside. I'm actually not sure how many years ago. But now they actually rent out a space in Research Park by the University of Utah, and they're currently developing their product. I think they have multiple products at this point, but they're currently doing stage 2 clinical trials with the Mayo Clinic right now. And so they've obviously been incredibly successful. And like Robert said, it is kind of hard to gauge at this point because it does take a really long time to bring any kind of medical device to market. But there are teams that are currently still developing their products and idea from Bench to Bedside. So.
Very cool. Thanks for those examples. We actually have a B2B question. So can you describe the simplified pathway that you talk to students about from prototyping to commercialization? And I think there's kind of a follow-up question from another person. They're also interested in the reverse pitches. So if you could talk about those things in whichever order makes sense.
Yeah, so I guess the way that we kind of frame it is that, I guess starting with reverse pitch, because it makes most sense chronologically, really what we have are doctors will go and they will submit their ideas to us, and then we vet them to try and figure out what would make the most sense for students to work on in this time period. Because obviously doctors can come up with some kind of research, more focused project that there's no way students could do anything in 8 months. I mean, I could work on it for the entirety of my PhD and probably couldn't solve what they're looking for. So we pre-vet those ideas and try and pick the ones that are kind of most aligned with either undergraduate or graduate students working on it for about 8 months. And then for kind of the simplified pathway from prototyping to commercialization, that really is kind of the second part of the process since the needs finding is so important. So for the prototype, we really try and get students to only have, or not only, but at a minimum have this conceptual prototype. We try and let them know that we're not expecting you to have a fully functional prototype that's just a material difference from the final product for competition night. We just want you to have something that proves you've thought about how this would actually work in the real world. The functionality can come later. You can always find people that can help bring your idea kind of further along. But we try and get students to start with that conceptual prototype, and then we do have these commercialization workshops where we talk about, okay, if you're going to meet with someone who may eventually end up giving you money to bring your product along, what is this business plan going to look like? So that's kind of where we try and bridge the gap from prototype to commercialization. It's understanding what is it going to take to actually move to the next step, and kind of, if you did have the funds, how are you going to move forward?
That's great. Thank you. So Maggie, earlier you were talking about how you had an undergraduate, I think a freshman, is that correct? And so there's a question about how you might recommend adapting the competition to an undergraduate institution that doesn't have an engineering program, or just working with undergraduates in general. And this is really for anyone, but I thought I'd start with you since you've had some of that in your program.
So I'm not sure it needs to be adapted so much, other than, so let me be, sorry, I have a lot of thoughts, so I'm trying to like articulate them clearly. The graduate students bring like a bit of professionalism to it, obviously, because they've kind of done this a few times, or at least the research part of it. So there's aspects of it that they certainly help with the whole team aspect, and like the leadership part as well. The graduate students tend to be lean into that a little bit more, not always. The undergraduates, and specifically non-engineering graduates, we actually have not had that many engineering students on the teams over the years. It's been primarily innovation design, human factors design, and then a computer science student. We always have one person that knows how to code. So, which is the opposite of what the most other teams in the competition have. It's usually stacked either all aerospace engineering or all computer science. So our team is an anomaly already, because we tend to have more design and innovation students on it. And our designs are better. I mean, I don't know that it needs to be adapted so much as just encouraging the students to know, like, you have a place at this table, and no one's really talking about, I think, the importance of your place at this table. But if it's poor design, no one will use it. Or if it's poor design, it might fail like in situ. And so I think it's just getting over that inferiority complex so much, and understanding that the whole reason NASA even has this program is because they are trying to answer these questions themselves. And so they want kind of feedback and ideas from people who aren't jaded by like the system. And this is what our NASA mentor, like our innovator in residence, tells us all the time. It's like, we've been looking at this for like 10 years, and we want to make sure that we're not missing anything. So don't think about what it should be. Think about what any opportunity, like think outside the box. And I think bringing non-engineering students to the table really, really helps with that. And I will say, this last year, we had more engineering students on the team than any previous years. And this was the year we didn't get accepted.
That's really interesting. So I'm actually going to ask a follow-up question. And again, this is for anybody, because this idea of working with undergraduates, like you said, graduate students maybe come with a bit more professionalization and experience, but maybe the undergrads maybe have some imposter syndrome or just a little bit of insecurity. So I'm curious, like, what skills, interests, or mindsets do students need to have going into a design competition, or to be successful in your programs? And then are there ways to support students in acquiring and practicing these skills and mindsets to help prepare them for design competitions, thinking specifically about undergraduates where maybe they don't have all the skills? Like, how do you address that?
So for us, it's we always start with like the design thinking process. So that's the whole divergent converge concept, like get as many ideas out as possible, and then kind of iterate on different ideas to get like your initial prototype. So everybody can learn that. And some of our students have heard about it because they've taken our undergraduate design thinking class. So they're kind of already familiar. But basically, if you can get over the idea of like, we have the right answer, and that you can adopt the idea that we need to iterate to actually get a good answer, and we need to have regular reviews, and we need to have legitimate feedback to tell us what is bad about this. Like, basically, it's that open-mindedness and that comfort with the uncomfortable, like the idea that failure is okay and some risk is okay, and that we actually learn more by failing. So that's that fail fast kind of innovation type mindset. If you are overly rigid in your thinking and aren't able to on board with that very quickly, we have a big problem. And unfortunately, that was our main issue with our engineering students. That's why I feel like, because we've had traditionally more design students and more kind of psychology students than engineering students in the past, the engineering students kind of get almost overwhelmed. It's like they're not the majority. As soon as we had a majority of engineering students, unfortunately, that's just not the mindset that they're used to. I mean, I came from a natural sciences background, so I know that's not the mindset they're used to. There is a correct answer and there's an incorrect answer. And that's just not, that's not how this works. So the sooner they can be comfortable with that, the more successful we are.
Yeah, did y'all want to address the undergraduate question or anything related to mindset and what's necessary to be successful?
Yeah, I can start with mindset. I would definitely echo the sentiment of open-mindedness. We kind of preach that you don't need to have any skills or any kind of specific resources to come in and be successful. But with that being said, you do have to understand what you don't know and find the resources to be successful. So if you're an engineer, you may think you know how to make a business plan, but you do not know how to make a business plan. So one resource that we haven't really touched on yet that we have is a teammate matcher form. So that's a resource for teams to submit, hey, this is our project, this is what we're doing, and this is the type of student that we need. Very specific needs. And then we have a so-called like free agent pool of students who look at that and join teams. And we actually do have teams formed that way as well. So really building a well-rounded team, I don't think is about any specific individual, but it's really the collection of different individuals and skill sets that make these teams successful.
Great. So there's really one question left. If someone's curious about how you're doing dissemination, like do students have an opportunity to share about their experience with others on campus or at conferences or things like that, or to write about them in papers, publish, or anything along those lines?
Yeah, so for us, I feel like since we have the student leadership team, that is kind of the easiest way to engage with students on campus. And really the student leadership team, we do have one student this year who had not participated in Bench to Bedside before, but it is primarily students who have gone through the competition and then liked it enough, wanted to be involved the next year. So that's kind of what we rely on. And then students, if they choose to publish kind of any kind of research with their device, things like that, that's something that they would do independently.
And I guess maybe one thing to add that we didn't touch on, we've talked a lot about the competition night, which probably seems ambiguous now, but we actually host it at the Utah State Capitol. It's a very professional event. We bring in people from industry, different clinicians. So at the end of the day, it's really cool. Like having the opportunity to present, it's really fun. I mean, not everyone has had that opportunity before to be in like a really nice environment with all these really cool professionals who are coming and asking you about your project. So even though that's not, direct dissemination in the way we'd think about publishing papers, I think that's an extremely valuable opportunity for students.
For us, part of the requirements of participation in the SUSE Challenge is you have to host so many outreach events, preferably to K through 12, but just anyone. And then you also have to at least submit a manuscript or an abstract for publication. So we've had a couple of past teams do that. We also have a graduate research symposium on campus and an undergraduate creativity forum on campus as well. So for this term, even though we're not in suits, we're still requiring our students participate in those things so that they get that experience. And then we are, at least our college is always looking for outreach opportunities. And so it's just kind of part of the design.
That's excellent. So I might have missed a question or two, but we are at time. First, I would just want to give a huge round of applause to the panelists. Thank you so much. This was fantastic. We have 30 minutes before our next session, and if y'all do have other questions or anything that I missed, please come up and engage with these folks. Thank you for being here.